Hello, it's noon on Wednesday, 25th of January 2023. Dr. Siti Maisara is on the show today. Let's begin the news in brief with this. The Prime Minister is scheduled to have an audience with the Sultan of Brunei, followed by a four-eyed meeting between both leaders. Today, during the meeting, the two leaders are expected to assess the progress of ongoing cooperation, as well as to venture new cooperation in common interest areas between the two countries. In the meantime, according to the Foreign Minister, the development of the halal industry, especially involving food, is one of the new areas of collaboration that can be explored between Malaysia and Brunei in the post-pandemic era. In other news, Communications and Digital Minister Fahmi Fadzil says this, that Malaysia Madani concept is not merely a slogan, but will be translated into the government's efforts to solve the problems faced by the people and create a better nation. He says the concept would serve as a guide for all ministers and their respective ministries to achieve the KPI or Key Performance Indicators set. He also says that the KPI is not about the number of programs implemented by each ministry, but instead it will be assessed by people's satisfaction with the services or program quality in helping to solve their problems. Meanwhile, the KKD, the acronym for Fahmi's ministry, is expected to announce the introduction and implementation of 5G by Digital Nasional Berhad with added features by the end of March. And Batu Pahat has become the latest district in Johor to be hit by floods. The total number of evacuees in the state rose to 3,612 as of 8 a.m. today. Meanwhile, in Sabah, Pitas and Kota Marudu are the latest districts being hit by floods, with 79 people being evacuated to 3 temporary relief centres in Pitas, bringing that number of those affected by the flooding in the state to 166 people as of this morning. Rescue operations are still being carried out in Kota Marudu. Well, it's now time to rope in Nordin Abdullah, our crisis management analyst. The start of course, what's coming out of a long weekend, but some matters to be unpacked here. Nordin, thanks for being with us. Of course, once again, a very happy Chinese New Year to you and the part of your family that's celebrating. The Prime Minister is scheduled to have an audience with the Sultan of Brunei. Now, during this meeting, the two leaders are expected to use this opportunity to assess the progress of ongoing cooperation. The question here is, what are the potential challenges or perhaps issues that you foresee that may arise during the audience and the four-eyed meeting between the Prime Minister and the Sultan of Brunei? Nordin.
Well, Jessie, when it comes to relations between Malaysia and Brunei, they're actually very good. And I think it'll be an opportunity for both countries to highlight what they're looking at in terms of future-facing economy. And one of those areas I think we're going to see is the further development of the halal sector as a strategic collaboration area that both countries and both the economies can be more complementary. One of the things that Brunei is good at is exporting capital, and Malaysia has the expertise. And in terms of the halal standards, we are quite aligned there. So I think in terms of opportunities, as opposed to challenges, I think should be the focus of the two leaders when they meet in the coming in the future.
Right, Nordin, you've just pointed out to the halal industry. Of course, this is one of the avenues that will be discussed and explored. How do you see both countries working together in this aspect, and really what strategies moving forward would be most effective in reaching this halal industry goal or collaboration?
Well, in terms of strategies, we need to leverage off each other's strengths. And as mentioned earlier, Brunei has a considerable amount of capital that can be employed. At the same time, Malaysia has a lot of expertise and a lot of companies that are able to produce food. When we look at markets that are closest to us, I think we need to look at the Muslim markets of Southeast Asia. With the growth of Indonesia's economy, we're seeing more and more demand for higher valued halal food, and that will be one key market to look at. And of course, after that, we can look at the broader OIC markets, where Malaysia and Brunei have a very good standing in those countries. So the branding, the country branding, will serve well, but we need to employ more capital, more resources to improve our supply chains, especially in the cold chain, so that we can ensure that the goods remain, one, halal, and two, taib, all the way to markets. And some of those markets are in the Middle East, some of those markets are Muslim communities in Europe. So it's going to be all about improving standardization, improving export quality food based on what the destination markets demand, not just necessarily saying that Malaysia's halal standard is good. Our halal standard is good, but it needs to be, our production of whatever food that may be, needs to be compliant with international destination markets.
Nori, I still got you for a couple of minutes, and so I'm going to dive in with this question. In terms of the Malaysian ministerial delegation to Italy to look at a potential FDI collaboration or partnership worth $758 million US. This is, of course, something that's attractive, that's on the table. The minister, or the meeting minister, the International Trade and Industry Minister, Tengku Zafrul, has said that this is a potential attraction. What specific sectors do you see or anticipate will receive a majority of the potential FDI? And what impact do you expect these investments to have on the Malaysian economy this year?
Well, firstly, congratulations to the minister in terms of getting this investments announced. Of course, we'd like to see more details. And one thing at the Malaysia Global Business Forum we're looking at is receiving more business delegations, especially from Europe, especially from Italy. But one of the sectors that we're seeing in Malaysia is now positioning itself is in terms of not just cheap manufacturing, but being able to do high-value manufacturing with a little bit more expertise than other competitors within the region. So I think one area will be this, as well as for those investors from Europe who are looking for a country that is more ESG compliant. So what we're saying now is Malaysia's competitive advantage will be the labor forces here, the access to key markets within ASEAN, and the fact that we're moving towards a more robust ESG system that will allow for European investors to put their supply chain here in Malaysia and still be globally compliant. And that's a key strategy for Malaysia moving forward.
Nordin, thank you for your time, and of course it's always interesting to dissect these trending stories, and we will have our pulse on it as well as these stories develop further. We'll speak to you soon. It's time for me to take a quick break. When I come back, I speak to Dr. Siti Maisarah Ahmad, a reproductive medicine specialist, obstetric and gynecologist at the Hospital Tunku Aziza. She talks to us about Cervical Cancer Awareness Month, which is of course in January. That comes on right after this break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Here's a brief look at the business world now. The ringgit extended its upbeat momentum to open higher versus the US dollar today, supported by renewed buying interest in the currency and improved sentiment on China's continued opening for international travel. Today, $1 is 4 ringgit and 27 cents. In the meantime, according to an analyst, Malaysia opened marginally higher today after a long weekend due to the Chinese New Year holidays, trading cautiously. At 9:05 a.m. today, the BFM KLCI edged up 0.07 of a point to 1500.40 from 1500.33 at last Friday's close. And briefly, gold is now 257 ringgit 42 cent per gram. That's up 39 cents from last Friday. In other trending business stories, the recent ministerial delegation to Italy, led by the International Trade and Industry Minister, has attracted potential foreign direct investments worth 3.25 billion ringgit. Now, the Italian companies are interested to invest in various fields, and these include the chemical industry, green technologies, e-economy, smart technologies, and Industrial Revolution 4.0 value chains. And in international business, Microsoft narrowly missed Wall Street estimates for second quarter revenue on Tuesday, squeezed by a slump in the personal computer market that hammered its Windows software business. Microsoft is wrestling with a steep drop in the computing division, which includes products like Windows operating systems and devices. Well, January, besides being the first month of the year, is also an important month in terms of cervical cancer awareness. Now, according to the World Health Organization, cervical cancer is a significant health concern in many developing countries, including Malaysia. It is the second most common cancer among women in the country and the leading cause of cancer deaths among Malaysian women. I'm now joined by Dr. Siti Maisara from Hospital Tunku Aziza to walk us through this particular awareness month. Doctor, thanks for being with us once again. It's always good to speak to you. What would you say are the recommended screening tests for cervical cancer, and how often should it be done? Let's start with that.
Thank you, Jessie and Dulama, for having me again. So basically, as we know, cervical cancer is actually caused by human papillomavirus, and as mentioned by Jessie just now, is the leading cause of cervical death in women, cancer among women in Malaysia. We can actually screen. It has very effective screening tools. We can do it either by one is pap smear, where we can actually see any changes in the cervical tissue, as you see in the slide, and is actually HPV DNA, whereby we can actually test for which type of HPV virus is in your vaginal colony, which can to detect whether it's high risk to develop cancer or not. For pap smear, you have to see your doctor. You can do it once you're sexually active, and you can do it 3 yearly until you're 65 years old. For pap test, it's actually the one that we can use. We can do by our own self, which has been started in Malaysia actually, and some of the clinic kesihatan in Malaysia has this service where we can actually do a self-test to see whether you have a high-risk HPV virus or not. And if you don't have that, the high-risk virus, you can do it every 5 yearly. So that's the screening that we can do.
Right. Of course, cervical cancer, as you've also pointed out, can be prevented through regular screening, but there's also vaccination, and this vaccination has become sort of available since 2007 or around that sort of timeline, and it's been shown to provide almost 100% of protection against several high-risk strains of HPV. How important is this for young girls, pre-teens and women?
As you mentioned correctly, HPV vaccination has been around since 2007-2008, which has a very good result for preventing cervical cancer. For a sexual naive girls, pre-teen, we can actually give them the vaccination to boost up to give the immunity against the HPV with the high risk to develop the high risk HPV, which is the 16 and 18 subtype. And for girls, it's very important for us to educate that once you're sexually active, you're at risk to have the cervical cancer. And in the current environment, we have thousands type of HPV, human papillomavirus. So some of the vaccination that we give specifically target for this high-risk cancer HPV. And for women who are sexually active, what we can do is you can do a HPV test. If you are not having high-risk HPV subtype virus, you can take the vaccination as well. So we can actually target for young girls and also for older women who are sexually active, even if they are HPV test which is negative to the HPV cancer, high risk cancer. And in some part of the world, like Australia, they actually vaccinated the boys as well. But in Malaysia, we haven't done that yet.
Right. Would you say be the next progressive step in this sort of HPV vaccination and prevention?
Yes, that will be a next step. But then, as we are a developing country, cost will be an issue. So we will target the women, the girls first. And a study has shown with the HPV vaccination, it can not only reduce the risk of cervical cancer, it can also reduce the risk of anal cancer, mouth cancer as well. So there's a lot of benefit in vaccinating girls and also in some of the world, the boys with the HPV vaccination.
Doctor, what would your advice be to our female audiences today in regards to reducing their risk of developing cervical cancer?
Make sure you screen yourself. Do a proper screening by means of pap smear or the self-pap test as I mentioned earlier. And if, let's say, and get your vaccination. And if, let's say, your smear or pap test is positive, please don't shy away and go to an alternative doctors or alternative treatment. Consult back to your doctors. And if we can detect early stage of cancer, we have a very good prognosis for those women who have cervical cancer.
Mm-hmm. Doctor, thank you very much for weighing in, and thank you for reminding us about the importance of January being Cervical Cancer Awareness Month, knowledge not just for the women folk but for men and boys as well. We'll speak to you soon. I'm off to a quick break right now. When I come back, I'll take you around the globe on what's happening the world over. The International is up next. Welcome back. We begin our international news with this. WHO has called for countries, manufacturers and suppliers to protect children from contaminated medicines after a spate of child deaths linked to cough syrups last year. Its Director General says in 2022, more than 300 children, mainly aged under 5 in Gambia, Indonesia and Uzbekistan, died of acute kidney injury in deaths that were associated with contaminated medicines. Now, the medicines are over-the-counter cough syrups, had high levels of diethylene glycol and ethylene glycol. Moving on, buzz lines for bees and other pollinators where they could move across Europe and find food and shelter were among measures laid out by the EU's executive to reverse the decline of the insects vital for crop production. Now, the 7-year plan will also increase monitoring of these insects across the 27 member states, aiming to halt population decline in pollinators that are crucial for the majority of crops and wildflowers. Currently, 1 in 10 bee and butterfly species and 1 in 3 hoverfly species is threatened with extinction. In other news, Labour leader Chris Hipkins was sworn in as New Zealand's Prime Minister today, following the resignation of outgoing Prime Minister Jacinta Ardern last week. Hipkins and his deputy Carmel Cipollone, the first person of Pacific Islander descent to hold the role, was sworn in by New Zealand Governor-General in a ceremony lasting just a few minutes. The new Prime Minister will hold his first cabinet meeting later today. Rescue workers pulled 12 people, including 2 children, out of the rubble after a residential apartment block collapsed in the northern Indian city of Lucknow. However, more were feared trapped inside. Police did not immediately comment on any possible reasons for the collapse, building collapsing have become common in India, particularly during the seasonal monsoon rains, due to the old and often illegal construction. Next, Peruvian president says weeks of deadly protests in Peru have resulted in $515 million in production damages and a further $773 million in infrastructure damages. She's blamed radical groups for the violent anti-government protests spread throughout the country since December. The leader called the nation for a truce to set up peace dialogues with the actors involved in the political turmoil. Satellite imagery shows that an iceberg almost the size of Greater London has broken off the 150-meter thick Brunt ice shelf in Antarctica. The British Antarctic Survey said the occurrence happened just last week or on Sunday during a spring tide. The iceberg break-off is the second major calving from the ice shelf within the last 2 years. And Philippine officials yesterday welcomed the return of travelers from China, the world's largest outbound tourism market before the pandemic, at Manila's main airport gateway. Chinese travelers no longer need to quarantine on return home, and holiday bookings have surged. Asia's tourism hotspots have been bracing for the return of Chinese tourists who spent $255 billion a year globally before the pandemic. And here's a quick peek on what's trending globally on the Bluebird, that is Twitter. Hashtag Michelle Yeoh is trending. Why, you ask? Well, she has made history as the first person who identifies as Asian to ever be nominated for the Best Actress at the Oscars. A huge congratulations to Michelle Yeoh. Also, hashtag IKEA is trending. Based on the tweets that we've read, Malaysians are now planning to boycott Swedish companies due to the Quran burning by a Swedish politician in front of the Turkish embassy. Well, that's a wrap for this edition of The Brief. Before I let you go, catch me on The Nation at 3 p.m. later. I speak to Dr. Ram Sanasi. He's a consultant pediatric radiologist and the chief medical officer. I'll get his take on personalized healthcare for all. But just before that, the Bulletin Bernama comes on at 1 p.m. Stay tuned for that as well. I'm Jessie Chahal. This has been The Brief on Bernama TV. Salam Malaysia Madini. Thanks for watching.